Hi, welcome to Friesland Community Church. My name's Darren, I'm one of the pastors here, and thanks for being with us today. At our in-person service last week, we had the honor of hosting Scott Ritzema from Badgerland Youth for Christ. And our online services are always a week delayed from our in-person service. So you get the honor this week of hearing the message from Scott. He gives us an encouraging message from the book of 1 Corinthians. And then he also tells us a little bit about what is happening at Badgerland Youth for Christ and the amazing ministry that he gets to be a part of. And it is amazing. I'm just encouraged for you guys to hear what is going on in his life and that ministry, and that we get to be a little small part of it, of hearing about it here in Friesland. Next week at our in-person service, September 11th, we invite you to join us live for an in-person celebration service. On September 10th, that's the Saturday, the day before September 11th, we are having our 50s Drive-In Fundraiser as well for our youth group. This is where we host an old-fashioned 50s drive-in event where you can drive up and be served in your car, or come out and enjoy a burger, shake, fries, and maybe some ice cream at a picnic table as well. It's a great weekend, and we invite you to join us on September 10th. And then on September 11th, our worship service, and we're kicking off Sunday school too at 9 a.m. And then afterwards, we're having our all-church picnic in the Friesland Park at 11:30. We invite you, whether you would say that you're just an attender or maybe been here a few times, to join us for our great gathering that weekend. It will be a great time in the park playing some games. We'll have pickleball, we'll have probably some kickball, and a few other games for the kids as well. And no matter if you're in our Sunday school program or not, we invite you to join us for that. All we ask is you bring your favorite dish for salad or dessert to pass, and a drink for yourself, and we'll provide the meat and buns as well. It's going to be a great weekend to celebrate all that God has done in the past, in this last year, and then also looking forward to the year ahead as well as we kick off our Sunday school program. So it's a lot happening in the life of the church, and we invite you to be a part of it. Wherever you would love to plug in, we'd love for you to plug in. Then also, if you're a member of this church or a regular attender, we'd love for you to get connected in our serve teams. Our serve teams are ways that you and I can be of service to one another in the church. Scott's message today talks about us being the body of Christ and different body parts moving together. I'm not going to spoil too much, but this is a way for you to be part of the body of Christ. Whatever gift God has given you, you can use that to help be the body of Christ here in Friesland. So thanks for being with us today. And I'm going to pray, and then we're going to hand it off to me introducing Scott as I was last Sunday. God, thanks so much for being in our midst. God, give us ears to hear and a heart to listen what you have for us today from Scott. I know in the in-person service I was encouraged by his message, and I pray that we are today as well. It's in Jesus' name we all pray. Amen. Here's me introducing Scott.
So again, it's our honor to welcome back Scott Ritzema to share a message with us. And Scott, just a little bit, would you just share any new updates with Youth for Christ going on?
Yeah. I want to thank you. It's been about a year since I have been able to preach here. And about a year ago was the first time that you invited me to be able to preach here. And so a little bit about what I do and how we do it. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Ministry of Youth for Christ, but it got started in the 40s by a young man by the name of Billy Graham. So I don't know how many of you have heard that name, Billy Graham, before, but he started the legacy of Youth for Christ, did a bunch of youth stadium youth retreats and stuff like that, and he has continued, that ministry has continued now. Today there's about 160 chapters across the nation. I work for Badgerland Youth for Christ. Our home office is in Fond du Lac, but we have ministry that covers a little over 6 counties, actually. We have a parenting ministry that I supervise, that director there, and she actually has an office at Fond du Lac High School. And any kids that find themselves in the situation of becoming pregnant, we've built a reputation with that school where she gets to meet those kids right away. And it's taken years to be able to build that. But to be able to feel the hands and feet of Jesus in one of the biggest high schools in the state, there's 2,000 students at Fondy High. And for us to have a presence there is very humbling. We have met and ministered to kids who are expecting a baby as young as 7th grade. 7th grade. I have a 7th grader. Actually, my youngest is in 7th grade. I can't even imagine what it's like to be able to go through that. And a lot of these young moms, and I say young moms because the reality is a lot of the dads leave. They're gone. So moms are left to figure out, how am I going to care for this little baby as young teenagers? And so I love it. I'm humbled that we have a ministry that meets those kids right there to be the hands and feet. We also have a jail ministry. So Youth for Christ, our focus is teenagers or 11 to 19-year-old. That's our main focus. That's where we want to be. That's what we want to be doing. And about a little over a year ago, I hired a new jail minister. And so he goes into Fond du Lac County Jail, and Fond du Lac and Winnebago, they send their kids to Fond du Lac County Jail. And so it's a shorter term facility, and we actually go into the jails, meet the kids behind the walls there. We also do the same thing down in Washington County. And Washington County is located in West Bend. That's where that facility is. And so Washington County, Ozaukee County, even Kenosha sends some of their kids up there. And this guy goes in and meets with those kids, leads Bible lessons, talks to them. He has a group of volunteers that he works with. He just had a little baby, or actually his wife just had a little baby, about just under a year ago. And so he had a paternity leave, and so he was looking for people to go in. And with me being his supervisor, he came to me and he said, would you be willing to go into the Fond du Lac County Jail to meet with kids? And I said, yeah, I haven't been in there in a while. I did one time where I visited a while ago with one of our jail people, but I've never been in there by myself to minister. And so I went through the process, and I met with the kids there. Talk about something that will break your heart. First two gals came in 16 and 17 years old. And both of them had been incarcerated multiple times. And to talk about and learn their story of, like, how do you end up here? And what do you need to do? And some of them had some really good questions about, I don't get, the whole creation thing, or I don't get this. Like, it's funny how some of those stories come out and we get a chance to minister to them. After they left, 3 guys came in from 18 to 15 years old, and they were a little bit harder. Jail ministry isn't for everybody, but to be able to talk with them and hang out with them, play some ping pong with them, just build a relationship with them was very cool. And then the jail advisor had said, I'd like you to meet with this one kid, young man. And I said, yeah, by himself? He's like, yep. And so while I was talking to the boys, I said, yeah, I got to meet with so-and-so by himself. And these guys are like, man, that dude's crazy. Like, he is messed up. And I'm like, oh, great. This sounds like fun. And, for me, I'm picturing this big, 18, 19-year-old boy who's bigger than I am and stuff like that. And here walks in this 8th grade boy, not much more than 100 or 110 pounds. And I just start playing Uno with him. And he beat me the first game. And the smile on his face was so endearing and so amazing. And I was like, how are you the one that has to be separated from everybody else? And there's some major mental issues that he was going through, and a lot of demons that he had to fight through. But to know that we have a team of volunteers and that my director is going in to meet those kids multiple times a week is very endearing. We also have what we call our campus life and our city life ministry, which basically works with just general high school kids. They go onto the campus. We actually have a facility in Beaver Dam, in Waupun, and in Fond du Lac that we can minister to kids, but our heart is to go where they are. And so, I coach softball for Laconia High School. I've been doing it for over 20 years, but one of the main reasons why I wanted to coach softball is because I wanted to get where the kids were. And so if I can be on campus every single day in their world, I get to do life with them. And when I get to do life with them, I can minister to them. At Laconia High School, I actually get to run a Bible club before school, and I actually have, over the last, I've been with Youth for Christ for 18 and a half years. So over that period of time, I've reached a trust with their administration and with their kids that they call me if they need something. And once a kid left a Bible in their auditorium and they contacted me about it, and I have the freedom on that campus, if a kid needs a Bible, I can hand them a Bible. On public school. Now, it's taken years to get to that point. But we at Youth for Christ, that's our ministry. I don't care if the kid is one of the strongest Christians that you've ever met, or he hates Jesus. I want to meet him there. Wherever he's at. I could talk about Youth for Christ for a long time. We did 2 camps, or I did 2 camps this year, one in Minnesota, one out in Maryland, to meet the kids there. COVID has really hit our kids. There's a lot of struggles that are going on with our youth. I think with us too. But I have 2 daughters, one's a senior, one's a junior. And I said, you're going to camp. And my oldest daughter really struggled with it because she's like, Dad, you always let me have a conversation with you about this choice. You're not giving me an option. And I said, you're right. I'm not. And I said, that should speak of how strongly I feel like you need to be here. And she went with a bad attitude. I know, none of your parents have probably had a bad attitude with their kids, right? She went with just a bad attitude. And by day 3, I saw my kids be kids, running around and playing. And we took their phones. They had no phones. They had no electronics. They had to meet with each other. They had to play with each other. They had to figure out how to do life that week without an electronic device. And it was amazing. I remember my childhood when we would go and just have fun. And so that's just a tiny snippet, in all honesty, of what I do. If you want to know more about Youth for Christ ministry or what we're doing, or if you want to partner with us in any way, let me know. That's my job as the ministry director. We actually have 2 vacant positions. We have a high school position open in Beaver Dam and a high school position open in Fond du Lac right now. And so, or if you just want to hear stories, or if you want me to come alongside and help you in any way, I'm willing to do that. And so I love it that I'm able to talk to you guys who probably aren't that familiar with Youth for Christ and our ministry and what we do. But thank you for allowing me here. This morning, I've titled the message, Many Parts, One Purpose. And we're going to talk about Big C Church, all right? So all believers. And then we're going to narrow it down to Little C Church, you guys. And so, but before I get going, I want to give some of the context of what Paul is doing here, all right? So Paul established the church of Corinth right around 50 A.D. It was highly influenced by the Greco-Roman culture, and like a lot of new church plants, it started to have struggles after a few years. And so Paul actually writes the first letter of Corinthians, so 1 Corinthians, to offer some correction in some of the struggles and stuff like that was going on with this new church plant that was going on with the church of Corinth. And chapter 12, which is what we're going to look at today, Paul is addressing the issues that some members thought of themselves higher than others because of the gifts that they have. God's created us with all different talents, all different gifts. And sometimes, if we're honest, we struggle with some of the same stuff. Where it's just like, we struggle with it both ways. We struggle with it like, well, I have this type of gift, so maybe I'm a better Christian than somebody else. Or we might struggle with it the other way, which I think we do probably quite a bit, where we say, I don't have that gift, so I'm not as good of a Christian as that person because I don't have that gift. And so, just like us, the Church of Corinth has this. The words that we're going to read are words that Paul wrote to the Church of Corinth. But I believe that with the infallible Word of God, that those words that he wrote way back in early AD apply to us in 2022 as well. So I'll have it up on the screen. If you would like to turn in your Bibles, you can do that as well. It's 1 Corinthians 12, and we're starting in verse 12. Just as a body, though one has many parts, but all its parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we are all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body. Whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty. While our presentable parts need no special treatment, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now you are the body of Christ. And each one of you is part of it. And God has placed in the church, first of all, apostles, second, prophets, third, teachers, the miracles and gifts of healing, of helping, of guidance, and of different kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? Now eagerly desire the greater gifts. And yet I will show you the most excellent way. This is God's word for us today. Let's pray and then we'll dig in. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you that it is something that applies to us today as much as it applies to those that were in the early church. And so, Father, I ask that you just give us ears to hear. Lord, use our mind to be able to process. And Lord, convict us where we need to be convicted. And I thank you for your faithfulness through all generations. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So as I was looking at this passage and I decided that I wanted to preach on it, I thought, wow, you know, here Paul is talking about the church as a body, but like, how does that relate to our own body? So I did a little research on our human body, and I found out that our human body has 10 pints of blood in it. There are 78 different organs, over 200 bones, over 650 muscles, 7 trillion nerves. That's 12 zeros, 7 trillion nerves, 30 trillion cells. And as I was researching, I found it on the source, which is healthline.com. It says, these cells all work in harmony to carry out all the basic functions necessary for humans to survive. Healthline.com is not a Christian webpage. There isn't any faith stuff there. Okay? But as I was looking at our human body, I couldn't help to stop and pause. And so I want to pause here as well to reflect a little bit. It says these cells work in harmony. 30 trillion cells. The blood, the organs, the bones, the muscles, the nerves, all of that stuff works together for human life. Now you think about that. Think about that for a second. All those things work together so that we could have life. And as I was looking, I was like, that didn't happen by chance. There's no way that happened by chance. There's a creator God. There's a God that created us with all those things to work together so that we could have life. How amazing is that? 30 trillion cells working together so that we can live. There's only one explanation for that. There's a creator. And we know who he is as God. So what similarities does our human body have with the church? And so I want to start with Big C Church first. And when we talk about Big C Church, we're talking about all different believers, all different denominations. And so, like, I listed just a few here. You know, I had the Catholics and the Lutherans, the Baptists, the Methodists, E-Free, Christian Reformed, Pentecostal, Protestant Reformed, Mennonite. I just picked some. But they are all part of the body. And when I was looking at some of the denominations, I went and I said, I wonder how many denominations there actually are. And I found in Christianity Today, and it says, when it was published in 2001, so that's 21 years ago, the World Christian Encyclopedia counted 33,830 denominations worldwide. And it went on in this article, it says, with the amount of debate and division over theology and orthodoxy, since then the number is undoubtedly higher. But is this myriad of denominations a sign of chronic division amongst the church? Or is it, as some argue, the prime example of the church working together as different parts of one body? Now, some will certainly say, well, it's division. It's division, that's what it is. But what have we thought about the purpose of direction? Now, given the job that I've done with Youth for Christ, we work with all sorts of different churches. And even in my own story, I grew up in the Christian Reformed Church. I actually went to a Pentecostal Assembly of God college. And while I was there, I went to the Baptist church. Now, John Piper happened to be the pastor there, so it was a pretty nice draw. But over my years with Youth for Christ, I've looked at Big C Church, and I don't know, like, you think about like hospitals and feeding of the homeless. Who does that well? Well, a lot of those were started by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church started those. You know, even our church, when we go and feed the homeless down in Milwaukee, it's because of a Catholic church that's doing that. You know, I've gone to evangelical free churches, and there's something special about walking into an E-Free church and some of the warmth and the worship that they have. When I went to college, the Pentecostals, I will freely admit there's a reason why I'm still in the CRC church. But the Pentecostals, the joy that they have, I mean, on Friday night, what they love to do is go downtown Minneapolis and share their faith with those that were walking down the street. Like, that's what they wanted to do on a Friday night. And it was just awesome to be able to see that they had that a part of them. I've actually had the privilege of preaching at all sorts of different denominations. And just recently, I had a chance in Rosendale to preach at their Lutheran church. And I'd offered to preach there for years, And they had slowly started to partner with our ministry with Youth for Christ. And I remember one of the first times when I walked into their church, they had kneeling benches. And so when you would go in, they had a time where you would pull that bench down and you would kneel. And I'm like, wow. Like, I understand, like, there's some tradition there, but, like, there's something, like, really humbling and prayerful about kneeling before the Lord, especially with a body of believers. And it came from that Lutheran church. And as far as, like, the Christian Reformed Church, our Reformed Church, like, I love some of the deepness of their theology and their Christian education and the value that they have for that. But all of these churches, and I could go on and on with the Baptists and with the, even like the Mennonite and different ones, like, they all have different gifts. That they're all using some of their gifts in different ways. In verse 13, it states, whether Jew or Gentile, slave or free, there is one Spirit and we are part of one body. You notice that Paul is saying whether Jew or Gentile. All right? Two very different people groups. We're all part of one body. And he goes on in verse 21, he says, I can't say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. And I think there's a lot of times where our own pride as a denomination or as a church dismisses other parts of the body. And I struggle with that a little bit because I see how we can work together. In verse 26, it says, if one part suffers, we all suffer. I mean, that's true. You think about that. One of the guys that actually got saved through the Youth for Christ ministry was Ravi Zacharias. And I don't know how many of you know the story of Ravi Zacharias, but he had one of the biggest ministries of apologetics. He was an amazing apologetist. And he ministered to millions of people. And after his death, it came out that there was some really heinous moral failures. I've never met Ravi, but that impacted me. It hurt me. And like, when one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. Wouldn't it be better to honor each other and look at what brings us together more than what separates us? In the ministry that I do, I realize that like people are watching. Like people are looking at me. They know like when I walk onto a high school campus, like that's a Christian. What makes him different? I'm going to watch to see what makes them different. And many times I've heard people that have been like, well, I thought they were a Christian. I think people are looking at us and saying, okay, like, are you getting along with other Christians? You're all supposed to be together. I think we need to be aware of that the world is watching. And our job is to reflect Christ first and foremost. We're coming up to the end of September. Is an event that I absolutely love. It's called See You at the Pole. And basically what it is it's a bunch of Christian kids that gather around their flagpole at school. And they join hands and they pray. and they pray for their world and their nation and their school and whatever else they want to pray for. And at Laconia High School, it's one of my favorite days because the sun is just starting to rise. There's a cool fall breeze. And I look around the flagpole, and here there's Catholics and Lutherans and Methodists, and there's teachers and administration and students and coaches all together around the flagpole, prayed to the same God about some of the same things and the same needs. And every year I look and I'm like, this is what heaven's going to be like. Where all believers are together united, serving and praising one God. Far too often, we dismiss other believers, or we think of ourselves better than others. And Paul's saying, don't do that. Don't do that. It's one body of Christ. I'm going to talk about there we go. You guys as a church. And I named a few of the things that I felt like could apply to you as this body of believers and what it's made out of. I'm sure there are people here that are generous givers. There are people here who are servants, who are workers, prayer warriors, deacons, those that have the gift of hospitality, preachers, elders, those that have the gift of discernment. I mean, we could go on and on. And when Darren was talking about all the different things that you're able to do, all different committees that you can do, you have opportunities to use those gifts as this church, as this body of believers. And when we look at a healthy church, we realize that as that church with all the different gifts, we are all one family. We're a family. We get together on a weekly basis and we worship God. And we need to work together to fulfill the mission of Christ. And it takes all of us with the different gifts that we have. In verse 26, it says, if one part suffers, we all suffer. And just like Big C Church, Small C Church, we have that as well. You know, when someone gets diagnosed with cancer, we all feel that if we're a part of that family. If someone loses a loved one, we all gather together because we're a family. We're God's family. One of the things that I want to highlight, though, is that when we suffer, a lot of times we complain. And I had a pastor that talked to me a little bit about this, and he says, do you realize that complaining is a sin? It's like, I never really thought of it before. He goes, yeah, it is. He's like, it's a sin. You think about it, when did it ever work out for the Israelites when they complained? It never did. And yet a lot of times we do that, and I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that as well. But we need to honor each other. I want to talk about what Jesus' heart is on this subject. And to do that, I want to go to the Garden of the Gethsemane. And so this is Jesus' prayer before he is getting ready to die. All right? He's getting ready to suffer one of the most heinous deaths that you could ever imagine. And this is his prayer. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. Think about that for a minute. Jesus is getting ready to die. He knows he's going to be crucified. And who is he praying for? He's praying for you. He's praying for you. He's praying for us as believers. He spends the majority of his prayer praying for us as believers. And in that prayer, he says, that all of them may be one. That they may be one as we are one, in complete unity. This is Jesus' prayer. This is his heart. That the church will be united. That we will keep the main thing, and use our different gifts to spread the good news of what he did. In verse 31, it says, and yet I will show you the most excellent way. And the chapter stops there. And we look at it and we're like, what is the most excellent way? The most excellent way is love. We need to love each other well. Chapter 12 ends, and next comes 13. Love is patient, kind, does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, doesn't dishonor others, is not self-seeking, easily angered, keeps wrongs, delights in evil. We rejoice in the truth, we protect, we trust, we hope, we persevere. And love never fails. And Paul writes a lot of different verses about this as well. He says, let all that you do be done in love. Came out of the exact same letter that we just wrote. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And lastly, we love because he loves us first. Why do we love others? Not necessarily because they're that lovable. We love others because Jesus loves us. That's how we reflect Christ. We love even when we're not receiving that love in return. We love because he loved us first. He did it first. He loved us perfectly. In the Apostle John, Jesus says this, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have a love for one another. How best can we be united as a church? Love each other. Don't dismiss other people, but love because he loved us. At the beginning of my message, we had a little pause that said, and it was after that healthline.com, it says these cells all work in harmony to carry out these basic functions necessary for humans to survive. And what I did is I actually went and created a different saying, kind of off of like healthline.com. And so what I wrote is these Christians all work in harmony to carry out all the basic functions necessary for humans to have eternal life. We're the body of Christ. We have a job to do. How can we be the hands and feet of Jesus? How can we use the gifts that he's given each and every one of us to be a witness to Christ? How can we not minimize others for the gifts that they may or may not have? This world, trust me, there are a lot of lost people. There's a lot of hurt. And people are searching. They are searching and they're looking for truth. And it's our job to be able to do that and do it in a very loving and gracious way. Let's be the church. Let's be the church that Paul talks about and that Jesus prays about. Let me pray. Father, I thank you for your word. Father, sometimes it is not easy to hear, but Lord, we know that your word is true. And so, Father, help us to take these truths, to apply them in our lives, to be able to impact others. Lord, we want to be one, as you and the Father are one. But we need help doing that. And so, Father, we ask for that help right now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks again for joining us today, and we pray that your time with us was blessed, encouraging, and a little challenging as well. We have many gifts, and we're one body of Christ. And we just challenge you to plug into the church, whether it's this church here that we call home in Friesland, or maybe you're just watching this to supplement something from your church, and we encourage you to plug in at your church as well. We have plenty of places to plug in, and no gift is too small. No gift is insignificant. God has given each of us gifts, and he wants us to use them. We invite you to join us next weekend in our in-person gathering on the 11th for our celebration service and kicking off our Sunday school programming, as well as our all-church picnic on the 11th. And we invite you to come out to support our youth group for our 50s Drive-In Fundraiser as well. Hear this benediction from Paul to the Thessalonian church. May the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other and for everyone else, just as ours does for you. May he strengthen your hearts, so that you will be blameless and holy in the presence of our God and Father when the Lord Jesus comes with all his holy ones. Amen. We hope you have a great week. Love to see you in person next week. Bye.